Thank you, everybody. Can we be taking our seats nice and quickly so that we can start on time? Staff, could you please help students take their seats nice and quickly so that we can start on time? We're looking to start in about 30 seconds. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, everybody. Students, can I please have you sitting up, paying attention, eyes to the front. Thank you very much and welcome. I'm not going to talk to you for too long. We've got a very full assembly for you today. So can I please get you all to welcome Kev to the stage, who's going to kick us off for our NAIDOC assembly. Sparks.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our NAIDOC Week Assembly for 2025. I'd like to pass straight over to our Wallawani boys who are going to do the smoking ceremony for us this morning, which is one of the oldest ceremonies in the world.
Angabi. Hello and welcome. My name is Malachi Quinlan. I'm a proud Darrell, Ewan, Dungari and Gundagara man. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Darrell, Ewan, Dungari and Gundagara people, all my people. I'd like to pay my respects to elders both past, present and emerging for the teachings of the waterways we stand and meet on today, Gadigal and Bitchgal land. Me and these men are performing the oldest ceremony in the world, a smoking ceremony, which can be used at the highs of the highs, whether that be a wedding, or the lowest of the lows, whether that be passing of the spirit, a funeral, or it can be used on a day like this, at assembly, welcoming a guest. It can be used for healing and cleansing the area and the people, the mind, body and spirit. In our culture, we don't like to say goodbye. We say Wallawani, which means safe journey. So Wallawani.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is James O'Loughlin, and I'm a proud First Nations man with my father's bloodline connecting me to the Narungga, Kaurna and Nundjerri tribes, which spread far and wide across South Australia. I want to acknowledge that we are gathering today on the traditional lands of the Gadigal and Bitchgal people. I also want to pay my respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here, and to everyone else joining us here and online. We owe a deep gratitude to our old people for everything they've done, which allows us to breathe this air, walk this country and laugh freely. I'd also like to acknowledge Mr. Leddy and the college leadership team for consistently giving our people and our culture the opportunity to be showcased every time we gather. More importantly, thank you for allowing the college to highlight our key weeks, just like today as we recognise NAIDOC Week with the 2025 theme of the next generation, strength, vision and legacy. I hope you all enjoy today's assembly as we have a very special guest who has accomplished a lot in his life and plays a very special part in my life. Wallawani, thank you.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Creator Spirit, we give thanks for the strength, resilience, and wisdom of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, custodians of this land since time began. As we gather during NAIDOC week, we honour the deep spiritual connection to country and the enduring cultures, languages, and traditions that enrich us all. May we walk together in truth, justice, and reconciliation. Open our hearts to listen deeply, to learn with humility, and to act with courage. Help us to recognise the pain of the past and to commit ourselves to healing and unity. Let the theme of this week inspire us beyond words towards a meaningful change. Bless the elders, past, present, and emerging, who guide us with grace and strength. May their voices be heard through stories shared and their leadership respected. Spirit of all life, lead us to walk gently on this land in harmony and solidarity, so that together we may build a future grounded in justice, hope, and shared belonging. Amen. Blessed Emma Rice, pray for us. Mary of the Cross, pray for us. Live Jesus in our hearts forever. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Yawala everyone, that's how you say hello in the language of my ancestors, the Kunja people of Gungari country in Queensland. For those who don't know me, my name is Jade Sparks, and I'm here to introduce this year's NAIDOC theme and explains what it means to me. NAIDOC stands for National Aboriginal and Islanders Day Observance Committee, but when I think of NAIDOC, I think of celebration. NAIDOC is a time to celebrate Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's culture, history, and achievements, especially after years of discrimination, segregation, and other government-approved laws designed to stop the continuation of our culture. NAIDOC is about moving past survival into celebration. For this reason, NAIDOC is recognised across Australia by all communities, schools, councils, and workplaces. NAIDOC Week isn't just for Indigenous Australians, it's for everyone. It reminds us that the world's oldest living cultures are right here and part of all Australians' shared story. NAIDOC is especially important in reminding me of the privilege I have to be part of this culture. It wasn't so easy for my dad's father, an Aboriginal boy living in Brisbane, having to hide his identity, lie about his background, and avoid the sun for fear of getting too dark and thus discriminated against by others. His Aboriginal mother moved houses frequently for fear of her children being taken away. She couldn't use the same bathroom as white Australians or sit in the same parts of buses or cinemas as them. She wasn't even counted as part of the human population of this country. Today, I don't have to hide my culture. Because of NAIDOC, I get to be proud of my identity. This year's NAIDOC theme, The Next Generation, Strength, Vision and Legacy, calls me to honour my grandfather, great-grandmother, and all the ancestors with strength and courage by sharing my story and my culture with others. At Waverley and in my own life, I want to leave a legacy that celebrates and honours the wisdom of the oldest living culture in the world, by educating others so that they may appreciate the teachings of Aboriginal people. But we still have work to do. So this NAIDOC week, ask yourself how you can learn from Aboriginal people and their culture and carry forward this legacy, using your energy, ideas and voice to shape a more inclusive Australia that is proud of its First Nations people. Wherever your identity and your story lies, in sport, the arts or elsewhere, support Indigenous voices in that field and learn something new. Even one fact, one story, or one word in a local language. I'll leave you with this, Nula Nagala, which means see you or goodbye in my language. I would now like to introduce our guest speaker, Adam Goodes. Adam Goodes is a symbol of resilience and optimism and an inspirational role model as he works to create a better Australia for all. Andia Matana Man, Indigenous community leader, former professional footballer in the AFL, and dual Brownlow medalist Adam Goodes was named Australian of the Year in 2014. in recognition of his tireless community work in addition to his sporting achievements. Adam is the co-founder and director of Go Foundation, as well as the co-founder and CEO of Indigenous Defence and Infrastructure Consortium. He is driven to help Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to achieve economic independence. Adam's work within the corporate world includes advising large organisations such as David Jones, Qantas and Woolworths on their reconciliation action plans. So thank you, Adam, for speaking with us today and sharing your story.
Goods ties it even further, collects his own haul, runs inside 50. Oh, can any better than that? I don't think so.
And the Eagles get over the line. We'll know in 30 minutes' time. And we can't wait. As McVeigh gives haul and the Swans the first chance. They are going. It's the Brownlow man. Adam Goods.
Franklin gets away early. Thompson came hard late. Now a chance for Goods. Wheels around 40 metres out. How will it bounce? For a goal. A true bounce. Out wide. Goods is the target. Oh, Goods. Goodness me. On the greasy turf and then Goods. Awesome mark. Goods. And big Adam Goods leap.
Especially at the start of the year, that's a free kick. And I mean, the interpretation's still the same.
Out of the middle, Goods to the 50, sends it long, classic Brownlow medal form. The two-time Brownlow winner. Feeds back on it. Barry Hall gets there first, scoops it up. Goods for number 8, for number 8. You betcha, it's a one-point ball game. And Kirk to Goods. He can be the breaker for Sydney. And he might just break it here. He might go all the way. And in game 250, he kicks on it for
I have that imposter syndrome right now. I'm sitting next to a very special person. So for me, it's a sort of pinch me moment. But first, can we please put our hands together for the people that have opened up our assembly? I guess NAIDOC's theme, the next generation, strength, vision, legacy. As you can see how we started our assembly with our next generation, and then by having a leader share their strength about where they have come from and their journey from their family. But now today we have the opportunity to hear from someone that's done some great stuff, not only in my community, but your community too. So do you mind introducing yourself, telling us who you are, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin, and thanks everyone for giving me this opportunity to come and speak to your school. There's a few, ways that I'm connected through this school. My godson, James, who was up here on stage, which was really great to see him and the courage shown to get up and talk in front of your peers, which can be very daunting and tough to do, but he did that very well. Mrs. James married one of my good footballing mates as well, and I also play soccer for the Waverley Old Boys, which was a soccer club in the eastern suburbs, which was affiliated by alumni from this school. So I've been playing that for the last 8 years. So I know this school and this area very, very well, and I also have 2 little boys who are 2 and 3 who potentially might be wearing the blue and yellow one day. We'll wait and see. But for me, my name's Adam Goods. Goods being my father's name, which gives me an Irish, Scottish, English and Prussian background. And on my mother's side, I'm a Sainsbury from Narunga, Adnyamatna country, back in the Flinders Ranges, which I was back last week with my daughter actually. And growing up, I knew I was Aboriginal, but I didn't know my tribal name. I didn't know how I was connected to my Aboriginal tribes. When my mum was 5, she was brought up on a mission called Point Pearce on Narunga country, about 40 kilometres out of Wallaroo, where I was born. And she was taken away from her Aboriginal family and put into a white family in Adelaide. So from that moment forward, in my family, there was a complete disconnect between my connection to my Aboriginality, my spirituality, and lost all those languages, ceremonies. And that was a pretty defining moment in my life where we lost that, but it didn't mean that was the end of it. And I've been able to tap back into who I am as an Aboriginal person through schooling, through education, doing a diploma of Aboriginal studies just down the road at Redfern at Eora TAFE. And that gave me incredible foundation of what it means to be an Aboriginal Australian. Definitely a mainstream one. And for me, that willingness to continue to learn about who I am, not only as an Australian, but as an Aboriginal person has been something that, I've been thriving and wanting to do throughout my whole football career, and now that I've been retired for 10 years, to keep doing, because my eldest daughter is 6, I've got 2 boys who are 2 and 3, and I've got another baby girl coming at the end of October. So for me, I want to be able to do something that my mother wasn't able to do for me, and that was to instill language, instill culture into me and my brothers. But for me to now be able to give culture, take my daughter back to country, and actually be able to speak language of my children is something I'm really proud of.
No, thank you for sharing. That's pretty insightful, I guess, for us as people. We hear Adam Goods and this Aboriginal man, but I think one thing that sticks with us, last year we had Michael O'Loughlin come and share a bit of his journey and share a little bit about your story. But can you talk us through that journey early on, walking into the Swans, and potentially not having that connection to country, to community, and then what it was like, that transition when you first started?
I think it's a lot like, the young men sitting in this room. You don't know what you don't know. And for me, I didn't know how I was connected to my Aboriginal community. So the day before I moved to Sydney after the draft, Michael O'Loughlin calls me up and goes, "Oh, by the way, you're my cousin." And as all blackfellas, we're like, "Oh, we're all related, we're all cousins." But what he then went on to tell me is that our grandmothers are actually sisters. And what I learnt later was about our kinship sisters, our kinship system, and how in our kinship system, because my great-grandmother was older than Michael's, even though he's a lot older than me, he's actually my nephew through our kinship system. So he needed to call me uncle, even though he wasn't going to call me uncle in mainstream sense. So for me, knowing that day when I walked into the Sydney Swans in 1997, I already had a family member, already had someone else in the room that looked like me. But I also had Troy Cook, Robbie Armat, and Fred Campbell, another Aboriginal boy from Alice Springs that just got drafted same year as me. So I went from, being surrounded by my 2 brothers as the only blackfellas in my life, to now having 4 other Aboriginal men who are older than me that I could look up to and role model myself on. And over the next, 13 years that Michael and I played together, he was an incredible mentor for me, not only culturally, spiritually, but how to be a professional athlete, which was really important, how to be a good person, and then also helped me tap into the Indigenous community here in Sydney.
No, that's huge. And I think one thing I can probably, no, actually not I can, one thing I think that stands out for me is something that you've done post-footy. The businesses that you're a part of, the opportunities that have come your way hasn't happened overnight. So can you talk a bit about that vision that you might have had while playing sport for life after sport?
Yeah, I think I was 23 and we had a Swans family day, and this gentleman came up to me. I signed the cap for him, and then he gave me a piece of paper and it had a quote on it, and he said, "Just read that quote when you get a bit of quiet time." So I grabbed that bit of paper and put it in my pocket. At the end of the day, I finished lots of photos and autographs, and you grab your stuff out of your things, like, "Oh, here's that quote." And it was actually the date. Some people have those calendar quotes. Every day there's a quote from some famous person, athlete, whatever. And this quote was from Isaiah Thomas, who used to play for the Detroit Pistons, was an NBA player and coach. And the quote said, and this quote really hit me between the eyes when I read it, because I kept it, and I then put it in my locker, and I now have it in my office at home. And the quote read, "If I'm only ever remembered as a basketballer, then I've failed in life." And that was really important to me, because what people were seeing in me at that point in my career was Adam Goods is a footballer. But that's not all that I wanted to be. I knew that that was going to be a certain period of time in my life that I was going to be a footballer, and luckily for me, I was able to do it for 18 years. But for the rest of my life, I needed to be able to do something. And it's really important to, maybe sit with that in this room. We might have aspirations to, be a professional rugby player, represent Australia in any sports, athletics, whatever it might be, play footy for the Sydney Swans, whatever that dream might be. That's not the only thing you young men will be in your life. Hopefully you're already a sibling. Hopefully you're already a potential leader. Potentially you might be a father. You're going to be a community member. There's lots of different things that you can do. It's about what sort of values will you be bringing to the table. And we have strong values as a school here. Are those the values you'll continue on in the next steps and journey of your life? And I've got no doubt the values that I've taken from my sporting life have now continued into the way I parent, the way I continue to run my business. And values and those behaviours are such an important foundation of who I am. So it doesn't matter what I do, whether that's play football, write children's books, father to my children, coming to talk at events like this, you're getting exactly the same thing from me, and that's that person of value, person of strength, but also a person that, come from nothing and is just really proud of, my journey of how I've been able to come from nothing, been able to achieve something, but then able to use that platform for good and positivity, and then hopefully using that platform now to educate the next generation.
You talk about educate the next generation, I guess. Talk a little bit on the Go Foundation, which obviously has a fair bit to do with our college, but also 300 students across New South Wales, across Canberra and across South Australia. Giving you a bit of a plug there. But can you share that vision that you had there? And I guess you talk about what you want to leave after and educate. I think that's a great way to educate the next generation, but also to give our community a sense of identity.
Yeah, for those who don't know, the Go Foundation is obviously the Goods O'Loughlin Foundation. So when Michael retired in 2009, we wanted to pay back to the Sydney Indigenous community that had celebrated us and supported us through our journey, and wanted to be our legacy to say thank you to them. And it's been the last 10 years of the 16 years that we've been running that we decided to focus on where we think we can make the biggest difference, and that being in education. And what we've learnt by focusing on education is that our students that go to schools like Waverley are like me, who identify as being Aboriginal but don't have those strong connections back to community, back to culture. And we take it upon ourselves at the Go Foundation to immerse our young people in their culture. Sometimes it being general, sometimes it being somebody else's Indigenous culture from other parts of Australia, but it's all about immersing them in Aboriginal culture. And what that does, and just seeing those young men get up, with the smoking ceremony at the beginning of today, just think how many people would put their hand up in this room if I said, hey, would you strip down into, your undies and walk around here with, a bit of flame, talking to people about what it means to be proud of who you are. That's really tough to do. It takes a lot of courage to do that. But when you do that, and that culture runs through you, you're actually proud to do it. So anytime that opportunity happens, you want to be doing it because it's another opportunity for celebrating your culture. And it's really important to celebrate the things that make you you, because for me, there's been a real spike in my football career once I was confident about who I was as an Aboriginal person, my connection to culture, but more importantly, what my identity was, who I was as an Aboriginal person, and that really helped me thrive when things are going well. That's pretty easy, but also to thrive when things aren't going very well. And I played football for 18 years, and there were a lot more downs in that cycle of winning grand finals and accolades than there were of winning premierships and awards and whatnot. So for me, to stay consistent was actually knowing who I was, where I come from, and that being really important.
No, thank you for sharing. I guess this gets into the next part, and I was told there was no boundaries, okay, so Mr. Letty, I can't get fired for this. No, but I guess my next part we talked a lot about your success, and a lot of your career is about success, but you had a fair few knocks as well that you talk about, Can you share how you sort of came across and how you overcome some of the bigger hurdles that you had at one point in your career?
Yeah, the biggest hurdle for me was I was 17, just finished high school in small country town. It was the same day I finished my Year 12 English exam, I was drafted to the Sydney Swans. So I think I had 3 more exams after that. They were the 3 easiest exams I've ever done in my life because I already knew at the end of that week I was flying to Sydney to start my football career. But that was really tough as well because I got 2 younger brothers. My mum raised me and my 3 brothers by herself. To leave my 2 younger siblings home, that was pretty tough to do, especially to move to Sydney, a place I'd never been to before. So that was really tough for me in those first couple of years to, figure out how that was going to be my new normal, and for me to be comfortable in making a selfish choice to leave my family to come aspire to do something that no one in my family had done before, which was quite challenging. Once I got over that, then it was the challenge of playing at the highest level against, these incredible players that I used to watch on TV all the time, and then injuries, and then racism, and then towards the end of my career, every time that I went out on a football field, being booed every time I went near the football. So for me, knowing who I am, where I come from, always gave me an incredible foundation to, that was extremely tough times to go throughout my career. And you're going to have equally, hopefully not equally, times in your life where stuff is just going to be hard. And it's when you can rely on your core values, those core people and relationships in your life, they're going to help you get through those tough times. And for me, I built up enough of those people to help me get through anything. And I've got a really great group of friends, family, community members that no matter what happens to me, my family, in the future, we're going to be okay. But you as young men, you've got to find out who those people are in your life. Who are those people that are going to ride and die for you? Who are those people that you can tell absolutely everything to, and they're going to be your confidant? They're going to lock down them secrets. Because we need those people in our lives, right? And sometimes those people are the same person, and sometimes they're multiple people. And, I struck a bit of gold with, Michael O'Loughlin, him being one of those people for me. Just by having that one person, father figure, role model, my nephew that was always consistent there, just made it so much easier for me to get through all the crap that I had to get through, to be successful, but more importantly, to be the person I am today.
No, thank you for sharing that. I think when we talk about being booed and we talk about racism and what you experienced in that space, you work for an organisation that's not a black organisation. You talk about the support that you had from Michael O'Loughlin. What was it like getting support from non-identified people in that space when you were copying 40, 50, 100,000 people booing you? Where did the support come from in the non-identified space, and how did that feel, having that support?
Yeah, so for me, my whole journey as a player was about being the best that I could be. Then off the field, it was also about how am I helping the industry. So, putting my hand up, the first opportunity I did to be part of the Players Association, to be a delegate, to be able to represent players at that level, be able to represent Indigenous players at that high level. So for me, it's about getting uncomfortable and being able to sit in that uncomfortableness to know that the decisions, the conversations that I'm going to be part of are going to make a difference. Because if I was to leave it up to somebody else, then potentially it was never going to happen. So for me, not having another Indigenous player sitting on that advisory at the Players Association, well, who's giving advice on behalf of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander players across the league? And at that point in time, we represented about 11% of the AFL players population, which was a huge amount. We're only less than 3% of the population of the society. So there was a massive, massive importance I felt that I needed to play in that role. And I think when I look out to the young men in this room, if we just wait for somebody else to put their hand up and to have a voice for you, that's probably never going to happen. So having the courage to find your voice, having the courage to put your hand up, getting the voice when people tap you on the shoulder to potentially come up on stage and do a presentation, to do an acknowledgement, to, say something in front of your peers that you've never been comfortable before. takes courage. So anytime you see somebody do that, instead of walking past them next time and giggling or laughing at them, just give them a pat on the back. Say, well done. Just that little interaction will just build their confidence, and hopefully will build your confidence too, so when it's your turn to get tapped on the shoulder, you're going to jump up here and show that courage as well.
That's some really strong words, and I appreciate it. I think when we look now, you've shared a lot on your strength, on your vision. I think the legacy that when people mention the word Adam Goods, it's always positive feedback. Where did you get that, I guess, motivation to push to strive more than just be a footballer, to just be more than an Aboriginal kid that went from here to do this? Where did that motivation come from?
Yeah, I think my biggest motivation is, yes, that quote drove me every day to, not only be the best footballer I could be, but then also to make sure I'm trying enough of other things in life for me to understand, do I want to be a real estate agent? I love property. I wanted to get into real estate, so I did the course, and I was like, I don't want to sell property. I don't want to have to deal with people. I'd rather just be on another side and just accumulate property and buy property. That seems like a better space to operate and work in. So for me, I also love children. I was like, well, actually I want to build and run my own daycare centres. So I did a whole business plan, and throughout my football career, did that, went to press go on it, and I was like, do I really want to look after other people's children? I was like, maybe that's not exactly what I want to do, but I at least did a business plan and went down that process and did it. Loved computers, did multiple computer courses throughout my footy career. And it wasn't until the last 3 years of my footy career where I was sitting on the board. I knew that sitting on boards is where I wanted to be, because having a voice at that high level of boards that influence businesses, that influence school structures like this, was where I wanted to play. I definitely wanted to see, I want to be part of the change of organisations, the change of government and whatnot. So sitting on a board of an organisation called Supply Nation for the last 3 years of my career, and Supply Nation was an organisation that certified and registered Indigenous businesses across Australia, and what I saw in that 3 years was the incredible impact Indigenous business owners were having in Indigenous communities, and it was all through business. And I was like, wow, this is the space I want to work in. And 2 years after I retired, I left the board, started my own business, which helps Indigenous businesses engage government and infrastructure contracts. I work with about 160 Indigenous businesses nationally, work with 17 clients only, and it's all about creating opportunities for Indigenous businesses to grow their capacity. And why business? Why not government? Why not AFL? This is the space, through education, the Go Foundation, and business. This is where I know we can create the greatest change for our people, the Indigenous people, just in those two spaces. And that's where I feel like the legacy will be as well, through business and through education and the Go Foundation, that hopefully becomes a spotlight throughout my many more years of the impact we can keep having in those two different spaces.
No, I think you're definitely doing good. You don't need me to tell you that, but I think one thing for me that would really stand out is that journey that you share, but it hasn't all been amazing. That there've been the challenges that you share too, and I think that aligns with the theme for NAIDOC, which is strength, vision, and legacy. So now we talk about that legacy and what you've left and what you want to leave behind. You've got your kids. Potentially there could be a spot on the board for Waverley. We can plug that. But then I think for me now, there's a statue of you. I believe there's a statue of you over at Moore Park. You're on the board, as Miss Sparks mentioned before, with Qantas. You just come from Qantas working on their RAP. You're on a few different boards and committees. Can you share a bit about that space with us? Because as you look around here, there's 1,500 students. Not all going to be sports people, but they might want to go into the business space. So can you share a little bit about that insight on sitting on boards, making that change from that space?
Yeah, I think anything about going to a school as prestigious as Waverley, you only need to look at the alumni that you already know and have seen come through the doors and what they're currently doing. it's not setting an expectation on you and what you need to be doing, but there's core values here that, Waverley alumni take into the world, which I think is really important. I think going to school, being educated, at times I didn't enjoy school. What I loved most about going to school was playing cricket and soccer before school, at recess and lunchtime. Weirdly, I never played AFL at school, which was really strange. But for me, it was just about hanging out with my mates, which is great. And you get a lot of your values from the friends that you associate yourself with. So when I think about legacy, for me, it's about, what are we leaving behind for the next generation? So my mum, she was born on a mission in Point Pierce. She was stolen, taken from that mission, put into a white family. So I'm the first person in my generation, in our family, that was born off that mission in the last 250 years. So before that, our people lived across Narungga and Adyamatna country. So that's where I come from, and that's short history, which is a short history of Australia, and I'm really strong about that. So therefore, in one generation, what have I been able to create for my daughter, my two boys, and soon to be another daughter? And it's about, well, what are we changing? 28 years ago, my last year of school, we didn't have an acknowledgement of country. I was one of 3 Indigenous students at the school that I went to. There was no acknowledgement of conversation about Aboriginal people. That's changing, and it will continue to change. NAIDOC week is 1 week in the year we get to celebrate. Doesn't mean that we don't want to keep celebrating, and we will continue to do that, and saw some incredible pictures of your Indigenous round for rugby, which looked like a great celebration as well. So we find these moments to be able to share with our people, our school, our community, what it means to be a First Nations person. Hearing people come up here and tell you a story about who they are, where they come from. Listen to that, because it's different to your upbringing, it's different to your story. But what's really unique about everybody else's story in this room is that you have a really cool story on how your family come to this country, whether it was 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 generations ago if you're lucky. And that story is worth telling and acknowledging as well. But also acknowledging our First Nations student story, which is an even bigger legacy. We're talking tens of thousands of years, right? Which is pretty cool. I took my daughter last week to a place in the Flinders Ranges. Anyone heard of Bratcheners Gorge? No? This gorge is the oldest rock formation in the world. And it's in Australia, in the Flinders Ranges, on my yata, on my country. Taking my daughter to such a significant place, which makes her feel like an absolute little speck, which is great, in the timeline of us as human beings, but more importantly, that this rock formation is on her yata, her country. And she can feel really special about that and being part of something that's really cool. Just like all of us in this room can feel really special that we have the longest living sustainable culture in the world, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture. And that's something we should celebrate, whether it be just for this week or whether it be for Rec Week, but we should celebrate it. And if that means, being a little bit uncomfortable, listening to some stories sometimes, sit with that as well and enjoy it. And if you've got any questions afterwards, you've got some Indigenous students here, you've got Kevy here, ask those questions, continue that learning, which I think would be really great.
No, thank you. I do have a couple of questions I haven't proofread. They're from our junior school.
Okay.
I'm hoping that Miss Sparks proofread them, but we may have covered them, but we'll go through them. Kobe in Year 6. What's the one thing that most helped you overcome your challenges?
Oh, good question, Kobe. So the biggest thing for me was to overcome a sense of shame. The shame that my mates are going to laugh at me if I put my hand up and ask a question, that my mates are going to bag me if I try something and I'm not really good at it. As soon as I got over that fear that my mates are going to laugh at me or everyone's going to make fun of me, I just enjoyed what I was about to try and do. Try something different, which is really important, Kobe. So for me, it's about making sure you overcome whatever fears you might have. And if those fears are driven by other people, then you need to forget about those straight away. The only fear you should have is for your own safety, because you want to go out there and try all the different things that you need to. You only have one crack at this life, and I think the biggest thing for me is that I've been completely open-minded about lots of different experiences during my time.
No, thank you. I'll stop moving. Mason in Year 6, what advice would you give to our Wallawani boys in their high school journey? So our Wallawani boys is our First Nations program. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about having a program like this, which I wish I was a part of, because it isn't just about coming to school and being treated the same as everybody else. If that's happening, that's fantastic. But sometimes these students are coming from really hard and diverse backgrounds, and by having a program, by having a team of people supported by Kev and others, means that they can just come to school, and as hard as their week might have been, or their weekend, or their day at school might have been, that they're going to front up and come again. And those programs are really important, and a big part of the reason why we started the Go Foundation as well was to support our young men and women at school to thrive at school. And we all want everybody in this room to thrive at school. And the best way for that to happen is to create an opportunity for everyone to bring their best self to school, but more importantly, to feel valued when you're here as well.
No, thank you for sharing that. The last question, which is a good question to finish on. What was the highlight of your AFL career?
Oh, we saw a few of the highlights up on screen. Anyone here play team sport? Yeah. The best thing for me about playing a team sport is that when you lose, you can blame someone else. No. You lose together. But also, when you win together. And I have to say this, I've lost more games than I've won throughout my career. Played in 4 grand finals, won 2 grand finals in front of 100,000 people at the MCG. Lost a grand final by 1 point, and lost a grand final by 72 points against Hawthorn in 2014. But they are the best highlight of my career. And the reason that it was the best highlight of my career, because you always wanted, as any sports person, who's our greatest rivalry at Waverley?
Barker?
Yeah. So we have a rivalry, right? So weirdly, we always seem to play stronger, make sure our best team's available for those games. So for me, that pressure is at another level. So you want to make sure that you perform at your best under pressure. So times that by about 1,000, and that's what AFL Grand Final's like, in front of the whole country watching. And more importantly, you're playing against the best opposition in the league. And there's only 22 of you out there, right? 18 on the field, 4 on the bench. So to be able to perform at that highest level with everybody watching, and then still only to win, the 2 grand finals that we won by 4 points, and we won by 10 points. And only to still win by such a small margin just shows how hard it is to be successful at that high level, high intensity, high pressure. And those grand finals are my greatest highlight, because not only do they bond me with my players that I played with, and for those young people in the room, I celebrated 20-year anniversary of our 2005 grand final a couple of weeks ago. And, it's like we played that grand final last week. The stories and the camaraderie that we have, just like the camaraderie you're building at this school when you have those big games against schools like Barker and you win. Because you'll remember that. You remember that for a long time. And you remember that next time when you see them, and you might be working in the same office as some of those alumni, and you can constantly keep reminding them, I remember when we beat you in Year 12 in the big game. Like, they're the sorts of events in your life that you'll cherish and celebrate. And for me, they come from sport. And now they come through my children, which is really, really beautiful and amazing. But for me, they're the best highlights of my football career. It wasn't me winning Brownlows, it wasn't me winning Best and Fairest, individual accolades. It was all about the team success.
No, thank you for sharing. Can we please put our hands together for Adam Good? knew that we were able to get you for this year's NAIDOC Assembly, it was something that stood out for us. I think as a college in the First Nations and non-First Nations space, we thrive to push ourselves to be better, to educate each other, black or white, young or old, male or female. One thing that we do and that we're good on is building relationships, exactly what you've shared about, working for that legacy, working for that vision, and to bring the strength. We work closely with a guy named Aaron, who you would know, at Spirit Bird Creations, and he's all about making pendants, and I believe about 6 years ago he made you your first pendant, and then when the opportunity came to make a pendant, he crafted this one just for you. The dot lines down the middle of the points, there's 9 points, and that highlights where we come from, the 9 months it takes to be birthed, to come into this world. So this is a gift from our college to you to take on with you and your family.
Oh, amazing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
I'll buy it off you later. But just to highlight for us as a college, I guess you would have, for this NAIDOC theme, this NAIDOC week, you would have heard the bells change. For Reconciliation Week, the bells change. It's a subtle way to educate on different things that are happening around us. You hear the birds, and I'll tell you this, and I've been telling you this for a while, our people call them the oldest alarm clocks in the world. So just like when you hear that bell, it means let's move on. When you hear them birds, when you're out bush, when you're in community, it means, okay, Kookaburra laughs in the morning, it's time to get up. Kookaburra laughs in the afternoon, it's time to start to settle. The didgeridoo, the yidaki that comes from up far north, that's also a men's instrument, but it's also used for healing. Men and women both need to heal. So we utilise that opportunity when we hear about it's this week, that week, we have a bell, we want to do this. We do that for that reason, and it's a little insight. So moving forward, I'll make sure that, within our Walawani program, our young men are able to highlight what we're doing and showcase it a little bit more, because I believe our college is really pushing, and the vision that our leadership has allowed us over the last 4 years to have our Walawani students lead a ceremony, to have our identified staff come up and lead an assembly. So I think for us, we're on a great journey and about that next step of educating that unborn child. So thank you once again to the college leadership, to our Walawani students, for Adam for coming in. And for the students, for your patience, your tolerance and your respect to sit still for this time, and for our First Nations families for coming in and supporting your students and our guests today. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Well, good afternoon, colleagues, parents, special guests, and gentlemen. Welcome back for Term 3. I'm certainly grateful to Kevin, to Jade for organising today's guest speaker, and Adam for finding time in your amazingly busy schedule to come along and share your wisdom and your story with us. So thank you. To reach the very top in one career in your life is an amazing achievement. And when you chat GPT Adam Goods and you ask it, who's better? It comes back with one name only. And I thought, wow, I didn't realise, I saw the images up there and I remember watching the Swans through many of those years, but it only came back with one other person, and that was Gary Ablett Jr., who matched you in Brownlows, in premiership wins, and I think he had maybe one or two more in the All-Australian. But I just wanted to recognise at what level Adam is actually in terms of AFL. He's one of the greatest that have ever played it in over 120 years. So that's an amazing achievement for his career. But to then go ahead and make another career in supporting Indigenous youth through the Goods O'Loughlin Foundation, the GO Foundation, through Australian Literacy and Numeracy Foundation, the other foundation, the Indigenous Defence and Infrastructure Consortium, and the businesses that Adam spoke about, where he's seeking to make a difference in the lives of First Nations people across the country, and to also be honoured as an Australian of the Year, and he's just 45 years of age. So we look forward to your next 45 years, and I really enjoyed hearing what you had to say about the legacy that you wanted to leave. So thank you once again. We really appreciate it. We're not alone in our journey of celebrating, understanding, developing and enhancing our Australian culture. When I recently flew into Vancouver Airport in Canada, what shone out for me was a large totem pole, 5 stories high as you walk out of the gates, acknowledging Canada's First Nation people. When I watched a recent rugby game with our neighbour across the ditch in New Zealand, where their national anthem is 50% English and 50% Maori. When I look at their Treaty of Watagangi, which celebrates their First Nations constitutional recognition, I realise that we're not alone in this journey. And sometimes I think in Australia we just focus on what's happening in our world. This struggle that we talk about around acknowledging and learning and understanding around First Nations people is not just Australian. It is something some of our other neighbours are striving for. Today I also wanted to acknowledge an old boy, a gentleman called Max Connolly. Now Max is in the front row, too along from Adam, and he graduated from Waverley in 1953. And I met Max last week, and I've seen him at a couple of our functions over the years. But I wanted to share with you, and I invited him along to today's assembly because I knew Adam was speaking. Max is a remarkable example of what it means to live out the values we hold dear: compassion, action and service. In 1989, Max and his wife Joan founded the Stepping Stone House, which was a response to the growing number of homeless young people in Sydney. More recently, Max has worked to improve outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander youth, and in consultation with local communities and elders, he's helped establish safe and supporting housing options and introduce cultural learning experiences for young people. His story reminds us of the importance of walking alongside, listening deeply, and working together toward reconciliation and justice. I go on. Max and his wife Joan have also kindly donated significant funds in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for a science laboratory in our planned Science and Innovation Centre. That's a significant legacy to leave not only to the homeless, to our Indigenous brothers and sisters, but also to the college that educated Max when he came through here in 1953, along with his wife. So please support me in thanking Max and congratulating him. At the start of any term or semester, there's always lots of bits of information that I want to acknowledge as a community. So I certainly want to acknowledge the number of activities that staff and students were involved in over the recent break. Our Cadets Promotions course, which involved over 100 students and staff. Our Cambodia Immersion. Our HSC tutorials, preparing the boys for the trials in week 3. Our first 11 football played Scots. Our first 15 and 16As played a visiting college from New Zealand, Te Atuta. Our volleyball camp, our basketball camp, our Manchester City camps, and our rugby training from 5s through to 12. So lots of significant things. I certainly acknowledge all of those staff and students. As a community, I would also like to welcome all of our new students and staff to the college. And there's 4 staff that are starting our semester this term. And I'd like them just to ask them to stand up just so we can start to putting a face to a name. Miss Kathleen O'Hara joins us in our foundation as our foundation coordinator. Miss Katie Phelan joins us in our visual arts department. Miss Nicole Dunbar joins us in our religious education department, and Miss Brianna Saunders joins us in our PDHPE department. So please join me in welcoming those staff. I would also like to welcome back Miss CJ Tweedy in our junior school, who's been on leave for over 12 months. We also would like to welcome a number of new students to our college this term, and I know you will go out of your way to make sure that they feel welcome, and if they're lost, please point them in the right direction. 2 staff changes since we last met that I want to acknowledge today. First one is Mr. John Paul Boomerlin, who has accepted a position as Assistant Head of Year Level at our fellow ERA school, St Patrick's College, Strathfield. Now, as a staff, we were able to farewell him, because that only happened in the last few days of term. But he will actually start that job today over at St Pat's. So we want to acknowledge his 6.5 years service to our college as Assistant Head of Department, and also a significant contribution in our co-curricular and house system. So we wish John Paul all the very best. Thank you. I would also like to congratulate in advance Mr. Scott Coleman, who's accepted the role of Head of Campus at the City East College from the 9th of August. Scott has worked at Waverley for 10.5 years as a PDHPE teacher, a rugby first 15 coach, a head of year, but predominantly as the head of Greenhouse. Scott has led his house with distinction and made a significant contribution to the college's wellbeing program, framework and pastoral care culture. In rugby, he's coached 10 seasons at first level. He's coached the CSS team. He's also coached the Australian schools team. He's been a collegial and supported member of the PDHP faculty and always been willing to share pedagogical and innovative practice across departments. Scott will take up that new position on the 11th of August, so we have a little bit of time to thank him and farewell him. But I certainly wanted to acknowledge his service to the college and obviously congratulate him on that appointment. So well done, Scott. Thank you. About half an hour ago, 2 students and a staff member from Navosa Central College in Fiji landed at the airport, our partner school, through our Fiji immersion program. And for the next 10 days, our guests have the opportunity to experience life at a school in Australia, a big city, something they won't have seen in terms of the size, taking part in classes and co-curricular activities and exploring all that our wider community has to offer. So please make sure when you see our Fijian colleagues, please make sure you make them feel very welcome over the next 2 weeks. I'd like you to be mindful of our Year 12 students who are completing their last term of secondary education this term. Appreciate the HSC goes into term 4, but their last term of formal classes is this term. They have examinations in terms of the trials in week 3. Many are also getting ready to take on apprenticeships, and they're wanting to finish strong and set themselves up for that next step in their journey, their challenge. Please support them wherever you can. And in conclusion, all students across every year level, term 3 is a time to reset goals, refine habits, listen to messages from our guest speaker today, reflect on those, and bring new energy. Take pride in your efforts, keep supporting each other, and remember that every day is a chance to build others up and enrich other people's lives. Have a great term, gentlemen. I wish you all the very best. I'd like to ask our special guests, our families and VIPs, if you'd like to follow Mr. Heath out. We have a small function for you in the Performing Arts ceremony, and I'd like to call on Mr. James Horrocks, our Director of Student Wellbeing, to address the Assembly. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you everybody. Very appreciative of your engagement and your respect throughout our assembly today. It's a really powerful and meaningful way for us to start our term, and a new semester at that as well. So hopefully you've engaged strongly throughout this assembly. You've listened to what Adam was saying. You listened to the journey that he's been on and the takeaways that he's been able to share with you today. You'd be remiss if you didn't take those on board and learn from the journey of such an influential and strong man who's here to share his journey with you. So make sure you're doing what Mr. Letty said, what Adam said himself about thinking about your legacy, what it is that you want to leave behind, how you want to be remembered. Go beyond just your co-curricular efforts, go beyond just your academic results and what your pastoral record says. What is it that you want to be known for? What you are as a mate, what you are as a peer and a